Mr. President, I'm going to talk for a minute about another subject. Flood insurance. It doesn't do any good to offer flood insurance if people can't afford it. And that's what FEMA's doing right now. We all know that, or most people know, that you can't buy flood insurance really in the private market. I mean, you can, but for the most part, you can't. And if your house floods and you've got homeowners insurance, don't make the mistake of thinking your homeowner's insurance covers it, because it doesn't. You've got to go buy special flood insurance. And we've had this problem for a while, and the federal government addressed it by creating the National Flood Insurance Program. We call it, as you know, Mr. President, NFIP. About 5 million people who wouldn't be insured for flood otherwise are members of the National Flood Insurance Program. They don't get it for free. They pay for the flood insurance, and they pay dearly. My state, Louisiana, has 5,000 people out of 5 million who depend on the National Flood Insurance Program. We in Louisiana have the highest participation rate in the country, bar none. And despite what some people may think, my people who are buying flood insurance, they're not multimillionaires. They're working people. They're people who get up every day and go to work, and they obey the law, and they pay their taxes. They try to do the right thing by their children. They live paycheck to paycheck. These aren't multimillionaires paying for this flood insurance. And they're not paying for the flood insurance on mansions on the beach. We don't have those in Louisiana. These are working people. Now, for my people and for most Americans who carry flood insurance, their home is their biggest investment. It's the biggest investment they'll ever make. It's the most money they'll ever spend at one time. And so they want to protect their investment. And they need flood insurance to do that. And we, in the federal government, solved the problem. We created the National Flood Insurance Program. Now, last year, FEMA, which is under the executive branch, of course. We all know what FEMA is. FEMA rolled out the most significant change in history in the way the National Flood Insurance Program calculates the cost of flood insurance. The most important change in history. And they didn't ask Congress for our input. They just did it. They went out and hired a consultant who created a new algorithm. And this algorithm, supposedly, says FEMA, can see the future. It can look out 35 years and tell whether your home's going to flood and when it's going to flood. And they can not only look at a particular area, they say this algorithm is so good that it can look at your specific property and tell whether it's going to flood and assess the risk. Man, I want a dozen of those. FEMA calls this risk rating 2.0. There's just one problem. FEMA won't tell any of us in the United States Congress, much less the American people, how this algorithm works. I asked them to give me the algorithm, and I would pay at my expense to have somebody evaluate it. FEMA said, if I showed it to you, Kennedy, I'd have to kill you. They won't show it to us. But yet, when I ask them about it, I've asked them in committees, FEMA says risk rating 2.0, that's what they call it. They say it's fairer. And they say it's based on the value of your home and the unique flood risk for that property. Once again, man, FEMA's clairvoyant. This algorithm's awesome. They can look out 35 years. They just won't tell us how they do it. There is no transparency on risk rating 2.0. People have absolutely no idea. Members of the United States Congress have no idea how this algorithm works and how they come up with the specific price for every home in America. But I'll tell you what we do know, all the prices have gone up. Let me give you an example. In Louisiana, we have a lot of levies. Now, some of those levies are paid for with American taxpayer money, and we are grateful to our neighbors in America for helping us out. But a lot of those levies in Louisiana are paid for by Louisiana citizens. We have asked, how does this algorithm in raising these prices take into effect or take into account the levies? Are we getting credit for our levies? And they say, sure. And I say, can you show me? And they say, if I showed you, I'd have to kill you. This is a secret algorithm. No transparency. None. Now, in the past, FEMA has always recognized levies and their importance. And they say they're doing it now under risk rating 2.0. But they won't show us how. And our levies work. Our levees work. Last year, we had a number of storms. We had one that came through New Orleans. We have a levee system around New Orleans. It held. Thank you, American taxpayer. But we don't know how FEMA takes that into account. They say they do. They say, trust us. You know, every now and then I play poker with friends. And they're all good friends. I trust them. But you know what? Every time I play poker, every hand I cut the cards. It's not a matter of friendship or trust. That's just the way it's supposed to be. Transparency. Now, this isn't just my opinion. There was an interview in the Times-Picayune, Mr. Dwayne Bourgeois. Mr. Bourgeois knows what he's talking about. He's the executive director of the North Lafourche Conservation Levee and Drainage District in Louisiana. He's an expert on floodwater drainage and levees, and this is what he said about risk rating 2.0. I just can't figure out why some people get this minimum result and these other people get the maximum result. I can't tell you what the secret sauce is to get to that rate, and the reason he can't is because FEMA will not tell us what the secret sauce is. Now, what's the effect of this secret sauce? FEMA says it's going to make everything fairer. I know this much. It's going to make everything more expensive. According to FEMA's estimates, 80% of the people who have flood insurance and have to have flood insurance in Louisiana, in part because the mortgage company requires it, are going to see their rates go up. The likely average full risk premium for a home in Louisiana under this new secret sauce is $1,700. Under the old system, it was $766. That's a 122% increase because of this algorithm, this secret sauce, which FEMA will not let us see. My people can't afford this, Mr. President. And the reality is people are already dropping flood insurance. They said, we just can't pay for it. Something's got to give. We've got inflation at 8%. My rent's gone up. Food's gone up. Gas is gone. We just can't afford it. The number of flood insurance policies in 8 of my parishes, we call our counties parishes. In 8 of my parishes or counties, the number of policies has dropped from 290,000 in October of 21 to 267,000 in November of 22, and it's fallen. So that's 22,000 people, almost 23,000 people out of only 8 parishes or counties who've had to give up their flood insurance. Now, it's not just Louisiana, Mr. President. You may be having the problem in California. The Associated Press estimates that 1 million fewer Americans can afford to buy flood insurance by the end of the decade because of risk rating 2.0, their algorithm, their secret sauce. And E&E News has identified 425,000 policyholders across the country that have already discontinued coverage. What does that mean for each state? Well, for example, cancellations of the flood insurance because they can't afford it. 11% of the people of California who were buying flood insurance can't afford it anymore. They've dropped it. 11% of the policyholders in Texas. 9.6% in Florida. In Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, 8%. Now, this is a disaster waiting to happen, Mr. President. And I am all for a fair system. But I'm tell you what I'm not for. I'm not for having a federal agency without consulting the United States Congress, without talking to you, Mr. President, about your policyholders in California or me in Louisiana, without explaining to us how they're doing it, just unilaterally raising prices with an algorithm or their secret sauce, as I call it. Now, Senators Cassidy and Gillibrand and I have introduced a bill. It's called the Flood Insurance Pricing Transparency Act. It's a bipartisan bill. All we're asking to do, that FEMA do, is talk to us and tell us how they're coming up with these rate increases. The American people pay the salary of the people at FEMA, and my people and your people, Mr. President, deserve to know how their policy is being priced. And Mr. President Biden, if you're listening, I hope you will pick up the phone and you will call your FEMA director, for whom I have great respect. I don't hate anybody, but I hope the president will call the FEMA director here and ask him what planet he just parachuted in from, and what is he thinking, raising these kind of prices without telling the American people why. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I suggest the absence of a quorum.